Hi, folks. It's time for my yearly re-record. I'm going to try to do this a little bit more often because my supporters deserve to be thanked, and I want to keep things more up to date going forward. First off, thank you for returning to the Whiskey Ring. If this is your first time here, or if you're a frequent listener, please take the moment to like and subscribe, rate and review wherever you found the podcast. If you have suggestions for how to make the podcast better, or guests or topics you'd like to hear, please reach out to me at david@whiskeymyweddingring.com or via Facebook or Instagram. Second, I want to thank my vintage level sponsors, those at the highest level who keep this podcast going. Truly, without these supporters, I would have had to stop doing this a long time ago. Thank you specifically to Don, to John and Jim, Bill and Connor, Steve, Jake and Bill, Trevor, Michael and Jesse, Jared, Brendan and Larry, Logan, Patrick and Andrew, Dustin, Wade and Gavin, Daniel, and Justin. Thank you all for supporting, listening, telling your friends about this podcast. Cannot stress enough how much you all make this possible to go forward. If you haven't yet joined the Patreon, please consider doing so at patreon.com/whiskeyinmyweddingring. You can support for as little as $5 a month, where you can have access to ad-free episodes, and will also have priority if a vintage spot becomes available. Those spots are strictly limited, so if a spot becomes available, you're going to want to be the first to know. Lastly, going forward, I am trying to be better about posting show notes for each episode on my website, whiskeyinmyweddingring.com. These show notes will have links to websites and socials for my guests, and will also have additional information not in the interview, including reviews and tasting notes whenever possible or relevant. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to have you back as a listener next week. Hey folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today I'm thrilled to welcome back someone who has now, I think with this interview, will be the most frequent guest on the podcast. We have Lost Lantern, and representing Lost Lantern today, we are graced with NORA GANLEY-ROPER, half of the founding team with her husband, Adam Polonsky. Thrilled to have you back talking about this incredible triplet release of the United States of Bourbon, the 1776 and United States of Bourbon 100 proof. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat about these whiskeys.
Absolutely. So clearly, if people follow me, you know that I posted my review of the cask strength United States of Bourbon a few weeks ago, shortly after it went live in mid-June. Suffice to say, huge fan, was incredibly impressed. I think, like numbers-wise, it came just under the Lost Lantern Farflung Bourbon 4. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it was very, very small. Like still platinum medal, my highest rating, and I couldn't be more impressed with it. So I'm thrilled to have you on to talk about it. And let's just jump in. So this project goes back idea-wise to even before Lost Lantern begins in 2020. It goes back to 2018. Give us kind of a long-term map. Like what were the milestones that turned this from a point where it literally couldn't happen in 2018 to, early 2026 when you get the final barrels in and are able to really start getting this underway?
Yeah, sure. So United States of Bourbon, first blend of bourbon from all 50 states. And we also have a special one-off 1776 edition that's for the 250th anniversary. That is just the first 13 states. But we have 100 proof and cask strength, all 50 states. And for us, with Lost Lantern, as an independent bottler, when we were in the very early stages of talking about what that would look like to have an independent bottler that focuses exclusively on American whiskey, we spent a lot of time talking about what distilleries we wanted to work with, our dream list, all of that. But at the same time, in probably 2017, late 2017 or early 2018, we also would always talk about cool products that we might be able to do as an independent bottler, really think extrapolating out to when we were established, when the industry was a little bit further along, what would be the interesting stories that we can tell? Because for us, all of our blends are really a bird's eye view of a different aspect of the industry, be it Shadow, which is peated single malt, be it our Farmer's Fields whiskeys, which is estate, bourbon and rye. And then with this, the idea was to give people a single taste of bourbon from all across the United States. And we spent a lot of time being like, actually, not even that much time. We talked about how cool it would be if we were eventually able to give people that perspective. Because without an independent bottler, it just doesn't exist without an IB in the United States. And so it was one of those where we're like, yeah, that would be cool. Probably will never happen. Maybe it'll happen. But it was an ongoing conversation for us about when it would be possible. To your point, what are the different things that have to happen along the way? And at the time when we started talking about it, we don't think that bourbon was made in all 50 states, distilled there. There were probably brands that were based in all 50 states that might be sourcing from MGP or other places, but to have whiskey that was distilled, let alone straight bourbon that would work in a blend, I'm pretty sure that just straight up wasn't possible in 2018. So for us, as we were going, as Adam travels around the country, we have been collecting whiskey for this potential release for 5-6 years at this point. I believe our first purchase was 2021 when a distillery was going out of business in Vermont, and we decided to buy some barrels. And every once in a while we'll buy some inventory and say, okay, we bought this just in case we ever get to do our 50 state blend. And then in 2024, Adam came to me and said, I think that the distilleries are now at the point where we could do this. I think in theory, there are distilleries in each state. In theory, there are distilleries that we could blend, but I'm not sure that people will sell to us. And so what we did in 2024 is decide to send Adam out to visit the states that could potentially kill the project for us. So places that only had 1 or 2 distilleries. So the Dakotas, we didn't know what the deal was. Idaho, New Mexico. He went to those places that were Hawaii. I did go with him to Hawaii, but Hawaii, places that if someone said no to us, we would have to then wait, so that he's not spending time, or we're not spending time and money buying whiskey from Iowa, where we knew we could get great bourbon that would blend well. And so we spent about 2 years building everything. And then, January 2026, everything was in-house. And I had a month to blend because my now 6-month-old son was due January 28th. So we knew we had to get it done before he came. Here we are today, and it's done and it's out there. And it was quite a secret to keep for all these years. And it's such a joy to be able to talk to people like you about these whiskeys.
And I was going to mention this more towards the end, but the launch day, I think it was June 15th, with mutual friend Liza's interview in the New York Times. Fantastic coverage. Just thought of a question that I want to make sure I don't forget, which is when you bought that first tranche of barrels from the Vermont distillery that went out of business, did you keep that in barrels, or did you?
Nope, kept it in barrels. The nice thing about Vermont is it's cold here most of the time. Our production facility is also like up against a bank of earth, so it's cool. So for us, the beauty of being an independent bottler in this kind of space is a couple of years, 5 years, doesn't actually change the climate markers. And also it's Vermont to Vermont. We felt like it wouldn't influence the character of the whiskey enough to cause problems for that.
When we were when the idea first happened, it literally might not have been possible. There might not have been bourbon made in state in all 50 states.
No.
There were just states that didn't have bourbon distilleries, let alone straight bourbons, which I know was also a big thing. You wanted them to be at least 2 years old, so you could say they were straight, no additives, no adulteration, anything like that. Clearly, you and Adam have your pulse on craft distilleries. I know, aside from Hawaii, of course, he's more doing like the trips around in recent years. Was there any kind of, for lack of a better term, like a system that you guys had of keeping track of, this state might now have a bourbon distillery, like even a Google alert or something saying this distillery is opening up?
So he had a map that he would color code. So over the course of those years, states would slowly move from red to green. From red, meaning I don't think there is anything, or we don't think there are any distilleries that would be open to working with Lost Lantern as an independent bottler, to eventually every state turning green. So from red to orange to yellow, he was tracking that picture pretty consistently as he was traveling, and also as he was hearing about new distilleries popping up throughout the country, starting keeping track of that. Yeah.
remember what the last state to come online was?
I think it might have been Idaho. That was one of the hardest states for him to get whiskey from. So believe that might have been the last one.
Yeah, I think it was in the New York Times article. If not, it was on one of either Roper Report or Forbes. But you and Adam were saying that for Idaho specifically, there are so few there. I mean, we just talked to Alex at Warfield a couple of weeks ago, but they only do single malts.
Yes.
So I think Adam had posited, like, if we couldn't find for Idaho, do we ask Warfield to create a bourbon for us? And then you're still waiting 2 years after that. Hopefully it's good at 2 years, all of those caveats.
With their machinery, which is built for single malt. Like, yeah, we had the conversation, and luckily we never had to actually reach out to them about it. But yeah, that was an ongoing conversation. It's at what point we would get creative on how we got the bourbon. Like, we also talked about it for Arizona before we found Santan, because we work so much with Whiskey Dahlbach and love that team. Like, would we ask them to do bourbon? And in every case, we ultimately didn't have to. And that's better, in my opinion, because it's bourbon distilleries then. These are places that people can go and visit and drink their whiskey as well, not just us having the only XYZ.
And actually, going to skip around questions. So said also the hardest states, so Idaho, of course, North Dakota, and Hawaii. Each only had one distillery that made their own bourbon. It's what you said earlier, could have blown up the whole project if they were like, either they didn't have it of age yet, or they were like, I don't want to do it. How, I guess specifically with the distilleries that use in those states, how much were you biting your nails that they either you wouldn't like their whiskey or they would say no?
A lot. And that's why we went there first, because we didn't want to waste time with the other things. But the thing that I know about blending is, as long as the whiskey doesn't taste flawed or bad, even if it has one dominant note that might not work for our single cask program, it generally blends really nicely. So there are some distilleries that are younger, or their climate is so intense, and the whiskey that we're getting from them explicitly is supposed to be single note. Not like, I'm looking for three flavor markers in general for blends, but I figured that as long as the whiskey hit a certain bar, which is lower than our single cask bar, it would be okay. And luckily, as with a lot of this, we didn't end up having to have that conversation about whether or not a whiskey was there. We were pleasantly surprised continuously, and that was an amazing experience to have. But yes, we were very nervous constantly. We were nervous until all the barrels were in the warehouse about something falling through in the end. A barrel getting lost along the way, like Hochatown and Oklahoma, they have so little whiskey available, and they gave us a barrel, and they gave us one for this, and that's all they could spare. And what if that barrel went missing? What would we do? And so, yeah, there was a lot of nail biting throughout this process.
With just the logistics of getting from 50 states, I was surprised at first, and then it made sense to someone who asked either on Bourbon Lens or Drew Hanish over Whiskey Lore, saying, you said to them, like, so many people have been sourcing from MGP or other large scale sourcing facilities that the actual logistics of transportation were not as difficult as people thought. Like, Hawaii was an exception because you had to get it by boat. And what was the other state that you had to get it by boat from?
We got it in Massachusetts, because Triple Eight is on Nantucket. Yeah.
Right. I know I got that. You put that up as a Facebook post, and I got it. I got half. I got the Hawaii, of course, but I figured they wouldn't be shipping a barrel by air freight. I can't even imagine how expensive that would be. But no, that makes sense. But Alaska was able to be gotten over land.
Mm-hmm.
So in getting all of these whiskeys, from the beginning of the idea, you were pretty adamant that it was like, I don't want to do this out there profile. I want it to be a bourbon. And for this, I guess I'm speaking specifically about the United States of bourbon as opposed to the 1776. So you didn't want to necessarily push the boundaries on this. You want it to be a recognizable bourbon, different from the quintessential Kentucky flavor profile, but not so much as to only go to the whiskey nerds, the bourbon nerds. You want it to be approachable for people. So in that sense, how did you incorporate that into your search for distilleries, particularly, I guess, in those states where you did have more options to choose from, and you weren't like, well, this is what we got to work with or else.
Yeah, it would be. We were looking for the two things that we hope come out in this whiskey. It's both something that was clearly bourbon, that it could be something that's more of a kind of cherry profile or butterscotch or whatever, like whatever profile you want to talk about, but it needed to be clearly bourbon when you're tasting it. If we tasted it blind, we would blind taste it as bourbon. We also wanted something that spoke to the climate of that place. And so that, because for me with blending this, I actually wanted all of those flavor notes. I found the 50 state version much easier than the 1776 because there were more flavors that came through. So having all of those different things, like the wonderful density of Southern bourbon, and then the more delicate like Pacific Northwest profile that comes from a cooler climate, those were important. But yeah, we were looking for places that it's still bourbon. I mean, that being said, we have so many different unusual grains that go into this. There's some oats that were in one of these whiskeys, triticale, like all of the things that people experiment with do exist in this whiskey. They're just not pulling the bourbon so off profile that it would potentially scare away someone who likes more of a standard bourbon profile. We wanted this to speak to all whiskey lovers, not just the uber nerds like you and me.
And I do want to note I'm a subscriber to the Discovery Club, which is a wonderful experience. I had to skip just a couple months as things transitioned, but in those couple of months, I think I missed the Maine oated bourbon and the North Dakota one too. So that is on me. I'm gonna have to see if I can add that to this month's order if there are any left at this point.
Yeah, I think there
how
are.
Often do you? Yeah. It's like how often do you get them? I love oated bourbons.
Yeah, same. It's such a unique profile, and so that's the fun of the Discovery Club. Is secretly part of the reason that we were doing the Discovery Club was Adam was going out and sourcing all of this whiskey for the United States of Bourbon, and there were so many cool barrels from these distilleries that we wanted to share with everybody. And so you'll notice as you look through this list and then you look at what you've gotten from the Discovery Club, a lot of the distilleries, be it bourbon or rye or other things, actually were coming from this travel that Adam was doing. So it was a little teaser kind of for us, an Easter egg that no one would ever get, but still a great way to showcase these distilleries individually. And yes, the Discovery Club, a benefit of the Discovery Club is you will be able to get access to those older bottles. So those should still be available. We like to keep a little bit of inventory of everything.
I mean, worst case, I'll just have to, make the drive up to Vermont. If I'm going to do it, this is the time of year to do it.
It's true. Yeah, it's gorgeous, especially today. Yeah.
I want to go back to what you were saying about the particular regions, if you will. So, you just mentioned kind of a general regionality there. I think it was attributed to Adam in Liza's New York Times article that kind of a general regionality. The Southeast has this rich, viscous texture. Midwest, a little softer. Texas, bold, powerful, oak-driven. Northeast is more delicate. You've described your blending process for this as threefold. The foundation, kind of the more specialty flavors, and then the seasoning on top. When you were looking at what became the initial 12 distillery base blend, did you look at it from kind of a regionality standpoint to say each of these things should fit, or was that more of a secondary knowledge but not implemented in this blend?
So secondary knowledge. I use that to help me figure out when I've built the initial hypothesis, and then I taste those little prototype blends that I make as I'm going through this, understanding the climate and what they bring, be it like palate or structure or whatever, it helps me understand, I'm missing this. What barrels should I be looking to add that component that is missing? So it is something that helps with making those iterations faster than they would be otherwise. I taste everything, and then for this especially, I pulled a bunch of more classic bourbons because I wanted it to be more classic. It's not classic, but it's more classic. It's clearly bourbon. I pulled those whiskeys that I felt like would very cleanly fit that profile and started with those, because if I'm able to create that, then with those things that are missing, be it a mid palate, be it a little bit of structure or heft or something like that, I can then pull from those less classic bourbons that have those things that help complement that initial blend. So it's secondary. A lot of this is not as intentional as it could be. I could have said, I need to have something from every region. But for me, ultimately, I knew that like with this first release, it had to be good. It couldn't be something where I was like, oh, equal part. Like there's a lot of stuff that you could do from a marketing perspective, but ultimately it would be seen as a gimmick if the whiskey didn't follow up. So for me, in my head blender role, it was all about flavor. And so everything else went away, and it was all about how do I build a bourbon that stands up to the inevitable scrutiny that a whiskey like this with this kind of story would get.
And the intentionality piece is, I mean, it's very big to me. I love to know what the blender or what the distiller is intending with this whiskey, because I might not like something. Obviously not the case in this case, but I might not like something, but I can still respect the person's intentionality. If like, you told me this is what it was going to taste like, or this is what I was going to get. And I mean, I like it, but that's exactly what I got. So, points for you succeeded there.
Right.
Like you said, this is going to be the first one. So the 1776, just to reiterate, is the one-off for the 250th anniversary. So the 13 first states, and it's a different blend, different foundation, different series. So it's just those 13 states as opposed to all 50, which whereas the United States of Bourbon cast strength and 100 proof versions are the same blend but different at different proofs. So with the United States of Bourbon, as you just said, you planned this to be an annual release, which honestly I didn't realize at first when I saw it. I immediately saw it and was like, oh, this is also part of the 250th, and it's a one-off. And frankly, I also saw it and I was like, we know this was difficult to pull off. It didn't enter my mind that this would be an annual repeating kind of release. So as you look at the map that Adam had, the blend that you've created, and the ratios that you have, you said you don't want it to be exactly the same every time. You want it to be different. And with that, especially with these new distilleries or newer distilleries with newer whiskey, newer bourbon coming down the line, do you have kind of a list of sorts that you're like, okay, this is a distillery that I think a year or two from now might be better in the foundation in there, or even hypothetically, we worked with this distillery this year, but I think in a year or two, this other distillery that we know about is going to have of age or just more mature whiskey that maybe we'll swap out for that state's representative in future years.
So Adam definitely has a list of prospective distilleries in each state, because things happen, people decide not to sell us whiskey, new things come up, and so he has ideas of where we can do it. From a blending perspective, I'm not nearly as organized as all that, and honestly, it's both just because we're busy and we're a small team, and also because I do my very best when I'm blending to check my preconceived notions at the door. And that doesn't mean like I have an understanding of climate and what I'd expect that to do, but sometimes whiskey and distilleries surprise me, especially if things have been sitting for a long time or like how they work with each other. So as I start tasting things, I'm looking for resonance. So in some ways, like we have put aside 4 barrels worth of the cast strength from this year. We're doing our own mini version of a Solera to create that initial structure of the base. We'll add additional base components into it. But beyond that, then I start and I taste barrels and I see what they're telling me. And I'm definitely like, I'm not a trained blender. I have a trained palate, and I lean into the palate and the art side of blending, where I kind of just let the barrels talk to me and tell me kind of what is going to play well together. And sometimes I'm wrong about that, as everyone is. But when I'm assessing things, I'll come in and be like, I think I know what I'm going to put in this blend. And then I do my initial barrels assessment, and different things are starting to hum with each other, and I lean into that. So I expect that will happen with the next blend of United States of Bourbon as well. The nice thing is, it was a lot of work to begin with. We didn't use all the whiskey we sourced. We still have a number of barrels or partial barrels and stuff like that available for me to play with. It will still be a decent amount of work to make sure we have inventory for me to blend with, but it's way less of a tall task than it was to get things started.
And you both already have an incredible reputation through Lost Lantern. You had a previous reputation as writers and in the industry that helped start Lost Lantern and get people on board sooner. But now you've got 5+ almost 6 years of more than proof of concept. You've got excellent blends, single barrel. People know that you're going to not only put out high quality single barrels and blends. But if a brand is coming to you, they know that you're going to treat their brand with respect and the quality that they're giving you. So in a kind of fitting coincidence, I think the immediately previous guest to you is Wolven Whiskey out of Leith in Scotland, and they have kind of a similar parallel to you in that, and they're not trained blenders, trained palates because they were also in industry, but not trained blenders per se. They also started around the same time. First product they started 2020, first product in 2021. So there's more parallels than I think about now. I should have thought of that when I was interviewing them. But and they want to showcase particularly New World whiskey now, and you're obviously showcasing American craft and what American craft can do across the major categories. So I remember them to a person on their team of 5, they all spoke about a level of imposter syndrome because they said, like, I don't have this professional blender palate, whatever you want to call it, but I've done it for a couple of years now. I know I'm confident. I know in my head what my process is. And as I was listening to interviews and reading interviews that you had done, and I was seeing kind of the same thing, like and I just know you at this point, like, you're clearly confident. You know what you're doing. You know what where you need to work on, and you're like, okay, but I can work on this. As you're doing a project of this scale and this size, did you have moments where you were thinking, like, as a blender, either imposter syndrome or like, can I really accomplish this to the level that I want to?
Yeah, I mean, so my background, in addition to the industry, is in the startup world. And I feel like if you're in the startup world for long enough, imposter syndrome gets knocked out of you. Because for me, the people that are like startup veterans, you move from imposter syndrome to like, I'll figure it out. I might have to work 20 hours a day to figure it out. Hopefully not. But like, you'll figure it out one way or another. And so that's what I look at is if it doesn't work this way, you look at it from another angle. And yeah, there was a chance that we just not put this out, because if it wasn't good enough, we just wouldn't put it out. We would find another use. We have Far-Flung Bourbon, which is a smaller blending project, like not from a volume perspective. Well, yes, from a volume perspective too, but it's fewer distilleries. So at least 4 distilleries. I knew that a lot of the whiskey could go into that and work well. So I have less imposter syndrome because I'm just very clear with myself on where I am and when I need help. And I feel like it gives me freedom to not really worry about whether or not I've earned it or deserve it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm going to learn. I'm going to ask people questions. I have a list of people that I can call. And so that's how I process things. I feel very fortunate that I've worked through imposter syndrome I did about a decade ago. And so in this world where, I'm not a trained blender, but I can trust that I will figure it out, or my team will figure it out, or that I can go to the greater industry because we have so many great distilleries that we work with. And one way or another, I'll try everything and it'll either work or it won't. And it's not all on me too. I think that imposter syndrome also, it comes from a place of taking on so much responsibility and carrying so much and feeling so strongly about how well you want to do. And for me, I try not to carry as much of it because I have so many people I can lean on that have helped along the way.
That's one of the most positive answers to that kind of question that I've had. So I appreciate that. To go one level deeper on that, because again, size and scale of this and the complexity involved, there's no one else who's done anything close to this in the US. I think the closest maybe you're looking at Scotland with a massive blender like Johnny Walker or something where you've got 40 components or so in the Johnny Walker Black. But even then, that's been developed over decades to do this. So if you did need to reach out to the industry for either guidance or like, this little piece isn't working here, can you help me with this? Or guess number one, did you reach out to anybody for that kind of guidance, and who would you reach out to in that sense?
So we didn't. Ultimately it worked. Thank God.
Yeah.
We didn't need to, but there are people that we could send samples to. And often, like even when I do with Adam, when it comes to my blends and I'm stuck, is I don't contextualize. I say, hey, will you taste this and tell me what you think? Because sometimes I find that I'm so down the rabbit hole that I think something is not working, and he'll take a taste and be like, this is great. What is wrong with you? Stop worrying. Like you've been agonizing over this tiny detail that I'm not even aware of tasting it fresh. So people like Susanna Skyber Barton, who Adam worked with at Whiskey Advocate, we have sent her samples in the past without context, just to be like, what do you think? And she'll give us her unvarnished opinion on that. There are like Caitlin Bartolome, who is at Clear Creek, does McCarthy. It's like we haven't sent her samples, but she's someone I call whenever we have issues with barrels to figure out what to do, how to think about it. Like having that Rolodex of people that I can just call and be like, what do you think? But for a blend, it would be taste this, tell me what you think, tell me what's missing, tell me what I should work on. And then that helps give direction. I find for me, as I was talking about with Adam, as a blender, you get so focused on the edges, on the small things, on tweaking. You could tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. And at a certain point, no one else knows what you're talking about, because you're like, do I want this to taste like slightly burnt caramel or slightly less burnt caramel? And someone else is just like, this is like, you're not engaged at the same level. So having someone tell me when something is done, and having Adam, who I obviously really trust and who is my partner in doing this, be able to say, no, it's not there. And he'll tell me that something sucks when it sucks. But then he can also help nudge me when I'm kind of going off the deep end on trying to tweak things forever. So yeah, but we also have people in the industry that help us from that perspective as well.
No, I hear you. It resonates a lot with me. Just as a personal, like my main day job is nonprofit fundraiser, so writing a lot of grants. And sometimes when you've got a huge grant, like a state grant, and you've been writing it forever, I've looked at it too many times, and so I'm going to miss something because I've just looked at it too many times. It's in my head, and I'm not seeing those small things. And to me, what you were saying is it resonates with that aspect when I need someone else's eyes, because I'm not going to see. I'm missing the forest for the trees. Going to the blending again, for the blends, you said you don't usually let Adam taste the blends until they're like 80, 90% done. And then, like you said, he'll say, nope, this is done, or it needs maybe a little like more texture, more finish, more mouthfeel. For this blend, and it was done over the course of about a month when the actual blending took place. Like you said earlier, you got the last barrels in January, at the beginning of January, finished at the end of January. Did you have to go through a lot of iterations and retastings, or was it more like a couple of tweaks at the end?
In the like prototyping process or the actual execution of the blend?
Let's say the actual execution.
So the execution of the blend was after that January month. So it took me a whole month of prototyping, and then it took about a month to execute the blend. The good thing for us is that so far, it'll happen eventually. We'll have to tweak it once we do the full size blend. But for us, we've always found that when we do the full blend, it's always better than the tabletop prototype. And we've never had to make any tweaks. It might be like, oh, it's actually a little more cherry, but it's delicious and it's better than it was originally. So we always taste it and have ideas of what we would do if something was off balance. But so far, it's only ever been better, which is it's a nice thing for us, for sure.
And that leads me into a question as just a full disclosure, I asked NORA for permission to ask this kind of question before we started, which was, as you said, you wanted to get the prototype done before the end of January because your son was coming. And,
yeah,
obviously during pregnancy and postpartum for that matter, taste, smell, all these things can change, and sometimes change dramatically. Without getting into obviously the private details of this, the question that came to mind was timeline wise, 2024, you and Adam decide, okay, I think we can do this now. There are distilleries, there's whiskey available. Like, let's see if we can really do this. Did the fact that you were pregnant alter how you approached your blending? Mm-hmm. And in that sense, did you worry that, okay, maybe is my taste a little off or my smell a little off as I'm doing this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So luckily for me, my taste for whiskey, I did definitely not like some food stuff, but my taste, it was because I was more sensitive. So things that would not have grossed me out in other contexts, I was more sensitive to. And with whiskey, I drove Adam crazy because I was so persnickety about buying barrels because I was just so sensitive to all of the smells and all of that. And so I think it was to my benefit with blending. It definitely took longer to blend because I went through a process with my doctor of figuring out how to safely do this, because without ingesting alcohol, being able to pace myself. So I wouldn't taste more than 6 things. And every time I would taste, I had to spit out the whiskey, rinse my mouth out, start over again. So it was a longer process, and I was able to taste fewer whiskeys. But so getting through all of the barrels that I needed to assess for because it wasn't just 50 barrels. I think it was 70 or 80 barrels that took forever. It felt like forever to just do the initial analysis. But then for me, with doing, because we did flights of iterative blends, being limited to fewer, because historically I would do like 8, 10, whatever, because we're spitting anyway, we're not ingesting it. But like with pregnancy, you need to be even more careful. But it allowed me to be more intentional and engage with each individual sample a little bit faster than I would normally, because I spent the same amount of time assessing, but with fewer samples. So it was definitely stressful because I also had an end date. Like I had to get this blended before the little one came along, because there was no way I was going to blend with the newborn. But I do think like it's an interesting undertaking with all of this, the steps with like, I didn't get to swallow any whiskey. I actually did have Adam taste more than he would otherwise because I couldn't assess the finish. So I would give it to him and say, think only about the finish and tell me where I am. And so he did engage a little bit more than he would otherwise. But it was a long, more methodical process than it can be with blending.
For sure.
So it was a big
the finish was exactly where I was thinking. Was like, if you can't adjust, then that's, and I don't know about you, but for me, the finish can be such a big part of it, because it's literally the last thing you taste as a drinker. So if you have a great tasting whiskey, but then it just falls off the finish, it's always a little disappointing.
It ruins it. For me, it ruins it. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So thank you for indulging me on that question. It was too relevant, but also wanted to be sensitive with it. Something else, like I was thinking of, is a slight change, but thinking about in the logistics of it, you had several distilleries in this blend that are now closed. The one in Vermont, Sourland Mountain in New Jersey, Rich Grain in Mississippi. These are, obviously in some ways they're irreplaceable. You've got a set amount. I know with Rich Grain, you were able to buy most, if not all, their remaining stock. Vermont, you were able to get a couple of barrels. Sourland, same thing. So when you have this limiting factor with these particular distilleries, and certainly in the case, actually, I think in the case of all 3 states, like not a lot of alternative options. Do you approach those limiting factors as, okay, we know we're going to have to use less of this because there just isn't enough. So it can't be, for example, part of the foundational blend.
Right. Yes, that's pretty much exactly what it was. These are not in our base blend. I could use no more than 1 barrel of any of these. If we have a pallet of it, we want to make sure it stretches. I'll probably decrease that in the next amount. But with the idea of not being forced to change distilleries because of liquid constraints, yes, we held back a decent amount from all 3 of those to make sure that we would have inventory going forward for a number of years if we wanted it.
And I've had now multiple, I think 2 single barrels and a blend of Rich Grain. That is a powerful whiskey to begin with. So that one I knew was going to be more on like the seasoning side of things. But I mean, Sourland Mountain I've never tried.
Yeah. The Rich Grain actually blends well with others, unlike most other hazmat whiskeys, which has always been a surprise for me. But yes, it's salt and pepper.
I remember you saying that in one of the interviews, that the hazmat is one of the harder things. Like hazmat and super oaky are assuming everything else, like there's no mustiness or something off about the barrel, those are going to be the hardest things to blend in. So again, because of these limiting factors, do you are you already putting in plans to replace these distilleries on the list once that stock runs out?
Yes. I mean, luckily in Vermont, since we bought the whiskey that we did, there are a number of distilleries now that we could buy from. But yes, Adam, like in both New Jersey and Mississippi now, there are other places that we can buy from as well. But Adam is, yes, he has lists of all of the places to make sure that there's a plan B, C, D, E, if possible, for every state.
I share both of your surprise and how few distilleries there were in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah.
Shocking.
I don't think of it as necessarily like a distilling hub, but I figured there would be more than a handful, but it's just, there's not. And even fewer making bourbon for this project's relevance. So with that, I'm going to ask this question next. So because of Lost Lantern, I've been exposed to so many different distilleries and new states. Of the 50 distilleries in the blend, I have had on the podcast or are scheduling with 21 of the 50. And
awesome. Yeah.
All but maybe like 3 or 4 of those are because of you in one way or another. So, incredibly thankful on that end. Some of these distilleries that you have national profiles, the Cedar Ridges, the New Riff, Kings County, just throwing out a couple of names, High West. But some of them are, as we've said, extremely small, very limited stock, very limited reach. I spoke with Black Fork Farms in South Dakota, and they're like, we're in South Dakota and a little bit across the border of each state because there's not that many people and there's not that much whiskey. So if there were, I don't know, let's say you look at this list of distilleries and you're like, there are 3 to 5 distilleries that are either small or newer, lesser known. Which ones do you think people should really look more into for more attention?
Yeah, it's a great question. So these are mine. Adam would probably have a different list than I do. Mine comes from the blending perspective. So distilleries that I would put on that list, as I'm looking at the back of the bottle, because I can not remember all the distilleries off the top of my head. Adam would probably be able to rattle them off. Hochatown in Oklahoma, which will mention, their whiskey just gets consumed there. It's so good, and it's just all consumed there. So it's, hard to find otherwise. Santan Distilling in Arizona, they're a big brewery there, but their bourbon really surprises us continuously, where you think Arizona and you think it's going to be more like Texas. So like really dense, but it's not. It's more classic. It's worth drinking. And I think it's really only available in Arizona, to the best of my knowledge. I would add Backwards Distilling in Wyoming to that list. High altitude, dense bourbon. They don't make very much bourbon. We're trying to get more from them because we love it so much, and they just don't make enough to sell us that much more. I would also say Dread River in Alabama. Also, like, I'm really partial to these distilleries that are making dense whiskey from a blender perspective. That's what is hardest to find. Like in a southern context where it is hot and wet, you get less oak extraction. In some ways, similar to high altitude places, you get more density with the whiskey rather than everyone knows the Texas style. These are more viscous than that because they're not getting the dryness and the heat. And I both love, I think they're really fascinating bourbons. They're powerful. They're not for the faint of heart, but they're also, from a blender's perspective, that density of flavor is liquid gold because it creates a lot of the mouthfeel that you get in our United States of bourbon.
From a drinker's perspective too, that the mouthfeel, the texture and viscosity, you can't get that back. As soon as you add something or add water or mix it, you can't get that back. You said earlier in the interview that this project could have very easily gone the route of being seen as gimmicky.
Mm-hmm.
Whether as part of the 50th, 250th, or just like, okay, we're going to do a blend and throw everything in equal proportions. It could have been done. And I really enjoyed in one of the interviews, I think it was New York Times as well, that he was quoting Bill Thomas and Jack Rose and Ryan Maloney over at Julio's Liquors. I don't know whether to say Julio or Julio, by the way. I think it's Julio's, right? It is Julio's.
It's Julio's, yeah.
So both of them were saying, like, this isn't a gimmick, and it's not something that could just be whipped up on a label by a blender or distillery. And even, Bill Thomas was saying, in the context of the Whiskey Glut, it is another product, or 3 products, really, that people can look at on a store shelf or online and say, even if I'm interested, like, do I spend the money on this, like the 80 for the 100 proof version, the 100 for the cask strength version? And as this project was going, let's say from 2024 until its completion, of course, we've had more of a whiskey glut, plateauing of sales and everything else that we've heard and read about. Did you and Adam worry that this could fall either into the realm of people passing it off as gimmicky or into the realm of it sounds nice, but it's just not in the budget or something that we're going to go after now?
We talked about it, but for us, it was ultimately even more important to tell the story in the context where a lot of distilleries are struggling. For us, being able to say, look, there is great bourbon made in all 50 states. Here, we're going to prove it to you. That story was even more important to us. And yeah, like, we knew what we've seen is exactly what we thought might happen, where there were articles written or there were posts on Reddit or wherever saying this is a gimmick. Like the comments on the New York Times being like, this can't be good. Anything with 50 components is going to be bad. And then we've seen people taste it. And that's why having it be good was so important. Because yeah, a bunch of people probably were like, I don't want to spend the money. But then if they hear from enough people, wow, it's a really interesting idea, and it has something to add to the conversation from a flavor perspective. That, for us, it was worth taking this big swing to have people have that experience, to maybe open minds to another perspective on blending. Yes, there are a lot of companies doing amazing work on convincing people in the American whiskey market that blending is worthwhile. And we felt like this was another way to add to that. But also, we wanted to highlight these distilleries that are all over the country doing amazing things, and remind people in our way, in the independent bottler way, that there's so much to explore. And yes, you may be drinking less or drinking through what you have, but there's always something that you should probably add to your collection, be it our whiskey or a bottle from one of these really special distilleries. This is Lost Lanterns just continuing to have a very gentle kind of hand on the back saying, pay attention to these wonderful smaller distilleries doing interesting things. There is still really interesting exploration to be done across American whiskey.
No secret, I'm a huge fan of Lost Lantern, the Discovery Club, and keeping up the releases and also just buying product. I buy so little stuff right now, to be honest. I drink less. All this. So little comes into the house that I've actually purchased. So when I see that the Discovery Club is coming and I'm like, oh, this is going to be really interesting, or this is something I haven't tried before. Even the one that's coming this month or next month is, oh my goodness, I'm blanking again. Redwood Empire.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I had Redwood Empire when they first started. I had their blender on, and she actually introduced me to Caitlin. I think Bartlemay. And so I know that they've done great stuff, but I haven't tried their in-house distillate at this age and at this time. Like, I tried when they were still commingling with the MGP to eventually get to their own distillate. So I'm really excited because even the one that I've tried, it's something new. So for me, that's kind of the deciding factor of, am I going to do this subscription service, buy this one-off bottle, versus most of the other ones have fallen by the wayside, either for cost or because I'm just like, I'm not drinking them. What's the point if you're not drinking it?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We like to say that people are drinking more intentionally right now, and that sounds like exactly what you're doing. And Lost Lantern, we're a great fit for that kind of drinker because we're doing all the curation.
Exactly. You guys have done so much work that has benefited me. I can't thank you enough, honestly. So just a couple more questions for you. I'll let you go. I know you have a little one to take care of now. You mentioned earlier you were surprised that none of the partners or no one you had spoken to about this leaked the story. And you were teasing for a little while, but it was really on launch day with the New York Times article that it came out that this was happening. To put it bluntly, like, were there more like handshake deals or just trust that these people are not going to say anything about the project? Or did you make it more formal? Like, look, we're really trying to do this. I don't want you to have to sign an NDA, but like, don't say anything.
We have formal purchase agreements with everyone, but it never includes any requirements on what they are or aren't allowed to say. But what we told everyone is we're working on an exclusive with a national media outlet. Please don't ruin that for us. Like, we want, because also it to all of our distillery partners, it's a win-win. They get this coverage as well as us. And so, and no, when you're saying, hey, we're hoping to get the New York Times to break the story for us, that is a very easy conversation. And like, we put our trust. I mean, our distillery partners put so much trust in us when it comes to the use of their name. So it's only fair that we return that and say, hey, we're trusting that you're going to keep the secret, and we're all going to be able to share this moment together of this great revelation of this thing that we've secretly been working on together. And we're so glad that it worked. I mean, there were a number of industry people also that could have leaked it beyond our distillery partners, and everyone was just so lovely and game. And it was, yeah, it feels like a miracle that it didn't leak, that we didn't accidentally tell anyone, but ultimately the trust was upheld. So, yeah.
I've been in that postpartum haze too, and I know like things can just slip so easily there. And like, I certainly don't want to put any like blame or aspersion there. It just happens. Like, you're hazy, you know what it's like. But it really was incredible. And when I posted it the day it was launched, and I made sure to follow every partner who had social media to make sure I was following it. And so many of them in that day or days since have reposted the launch article or some other story about this, which, like you said, it's positive reinforcement cycle. It helps you, it helps them. And I think it also helps, I know you guys are so transparent about things and you put as much information as possible. I think in this case it was really helpful to not have the exact percentages of everyone that was in the blends. I know Cedar Ridge was the biggest component of the United States bourbon blends, but other than that, I didn't see or hear any other percentages out there. And it makes sense. I mean, you got 50, you don't want to be the one distillery that's like 0.1%, because then you have the question, like, was it really good? Was it really bad? And they just had to like throw you in there. So don't worry about them. But it was great to see them also picking up and being like, we're part of this. Try this whiskey. So 2 more for you. This is a question Drew brought up on Whiskey Lore, which was, you and Adam said, like, you'll never say no to 50 states of rye or 50 states of single malt.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of in the same place as you were when you started this project of, is there rye? Is there single malt made in all 50 states? And while you'd never say no, like, the bourbon project just squeaked through, in your own words. Like, it just squeaked through with being able to do this. Do you think that the rye or the single malt would also fall into that same trap of, like, is it gimmicky because we've already done the United States of bourbon? Like, or at this point, is it just so impractical that you're like, nah, worry about that a couple of years from now when it's possible?
For us, with every release, there has to be a reason for it. We have to be showing something, giving people access to flavors that they wouldn't get otherwise. So ultimately, be it another 50 state rye or American single malt or whatever, we would have to feel like there's a story there. There's a there beyond even the just like, can we logistically do it? Which I don't think we can right now. So for us, we'll make the decision when we start being able to think about what that would look like. And so we never say never, but also we don't have any plans currently to do either a rye or American single.
I have not done the legwork yet to see if there are, like I said, if there are in all 50 states, but then again, they may not be ready. They may not be good yet. Who knows? I hope there are. Last one for you, which is, we know you've held a couple barrels back from this year's release. Other than that initial starting point, how quickly are you going to start on the 2027 release?
I mean, probably this fall. It would be nice to not blend last minute, but the reality is we're always doing everything last minute, because buying barrels, that we're constantly, we have a pretty small space, so we're constantly rotating through things. And there are times where Ryan, our production manager, tells me and Adam that we're full and we have to wait. And so it's a dance. I would love to start working on it sooner than later, for sure. Because if I realize we need to call in more whiskey to get that blend to the level of quality that we've now set, better to have a little bit more wiggle room for that than to have to do it at the final moment. So we've got some stuff coming that we have to work on before I can do anything on that front yet, but I am hoping this fall I'll be able to get that.
Nora, always a pleasure to have you on. Really excited about these releases. I got to try the cask strength for the United States Bourbon. Clearly, absolutely loved it. Looking forward to adding those other, at least one, if not both, of those other 2 whiskeys that I missed onto my schedule as well. Hang on with me for just a minute, and then I'll let you go. Thank you everyone for listening. This is a very special episode. Please go to losandronwhiskey.com to find where you can still find some of these bottles. They were out of stock for a little bit because there was incredible reception at first, which great to see. The 1776 is very limited to, coincidentally, 1,776 bottles. The 100 proof United States Bourbon is about 6,700, 6,800 bottles. And then there are 3,300 bottles of the cask strength United States Bourbon to begin with. So not sure how many are left, but go to the website, see where you can still get them either through their website or through one of their partners. Check out the review for this product. Absolutely thrilled with it. Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you found this podcast. Let's keep those 5-star ratings going on all the major platforms. And I'll see you all next week.